I welcome everyone to the fifth day of the Institute Seminar Days, 2020 and 2021. So today it's a great pleasure because we have two great talks lined up today, one by Jam and other by Professor Pinaki Chaudhary. We're looking forward to today's talk. So Jam is talking about to number theory via automata. So it's going to be fascinating today. Looking forward to your fascinating talk, Jam. Over to you. Thank you for giving the talk.
Yeah, so let me start with thanking everyone for coming. Like Venkatesh mentioned, I want to first mention that mine also, this is not my work. I'm not talking about my work. It's more about sharing some excitement about something very interesting happening in this area of logic and number theory. Logic and automata, and some very interesting recent results that I want to tell you about, and hopefully give a flavor of the kind of ideas coming together in new ways to solve interesting problems. Yeah. Okay, so, well, I don't know number theory, but I know enough to know about some very famous problems in number theory. Here are some gems from additive number theory. Goldbach conjecture, 1742. Every even number greater than 4 is the sum of two primes. Well, Lagrange's theorem, every natural number is the sum of 4 squares. 1770. Waring's problem, every natural number is the sum of 4 squares, 9 cubes, 19th fourth powers, and so forth. I have the Latin original as well on this. That so forth is a very beautiful thing to say. Yeah. Okay. So, and it has kept people busy for a very long time, and Goldbach conjecture is hopefully keeping people very busy, I hope, right now. And so, in general, let S be a subset of natural numbers containing 0, and you say S is the basis of order H. If every natural number can be written as the sum of H elements of S, not necessarily distinct, and you call that the order. H is the order. In Lagrange's theorem, for instance, order is order 4. And you say S is said to be an asymptotic basis of order H if every sufficiently large natural number can be written as the sum of H elements of S, not necessarily distinct. Basically, you allow finitely many counterexamples, and beyond a point, you have all these numbers can be expressed using some order. Now, Lagrange's theorem gives you one basis, right? The squares, and you have various powers coming up from Waring's theorem. Now, what about new bases? What kind of new sets can form additive basis for natural numbers? Okay, here is one very interesting one. A number is said to be an OOPS number. This I found from Java programming exercises for my daughter. Okay, this is the sort of thing that class 11, 12 children are asked to write Java programs on. So you are asked to check if a number is an OOPS number. It has ones in all odd numbered positions in its binary representation, where the most significant digit is position 1. And the first few OOPS numbers are these. And as I said, this is exactly what the Java program turns out. And the density of OOPS is square root n, which is sufficiently high to make it a candidate. And the theorem is that the OOPS numbers form an asymptotic additive basis of order 3, but not of order 2. So you can actually every natural number can be represented as the sum of 3 OOPS numbers. Sufficiently large natural number, it's asymptotic. And so there are all kinds of interesting bases of this kind. Right? Now, let me tell you some recent results, which is what led to this talk. And Banks in 2015 showed that every natural number is the sum of at most 49 palindromes in base 10. And Cilarulo et al. In 2017 showed that for all bases b greater than or equal to 5, every natural number is the sum of 3 base b palindromes. And Rajshekharan, Shalit, and Smith showed that in fact every natural number is the sum of 4 binary palindromes, and the number is optimal, that you can't have with 3. Now, okay, so how do, you're suddenly manufacturing a whole lot of additive bases. And there are eminent number theorists in the audience, so I don't know whether number theorists are even thinking of additive bases of this kind at all, right? What candidate bases they try? right? Now, perfect squares are very reasonable to think about, but what are palindromes? Binary palindromes, for God's sake, why would you even try such things, right? And here is a couple of gems which I mentioned in the abstract, and really stunning results. Madhusudan, Novodka, Rajshekaran, and Shalit, 2018, showed that every natural number greater than 686 is the sum of 4 binary squares. And this is Madhusudan, who was a former student of IMSC. So we can also take some pride in that he did his PhD from the joint work with IMSC and CMI. And in fact, Kane, Sana, and Charlotte showed last year that Waring's theorem, a version of Waring's theorem for binary powers, that it's again asymptotic. Every sufficiently large number can be expressed as the sum of kth powers. You give me a k, and I'll tell you how many you need, right? And that's a computable function, in fact. And so here is a question: how did we get here, right? Suddenly, why is it that there are all kinds of results coming up? And it turns out that automata theory has been playing a very important role in this whole journey. And it has opened up very nice ways of approaching the problem. And okay, so how did we get here? Better question is, how did it start? Started with this gentleman, David Hilbert, in the Congress of Mathematicians in 1900. He proposed various problems. Well, I've already said from the ashes, so Hilbert's dreams. One of his problems was he hoped to prove every mathematical statement. And this was conclusively killed by Gödel. He hoped for an algorithm to decide whether every statement has a proof or not. This was killed by Church and Turing. But out of these ashes rose many theories, many first order theories of arithmetic, which do admit such algorithms. So there are theories of arithmetic where you can actually, you can't hope to prove every mathematical statement. Incompleteness comes very easily. But there are arithmetical theories where you can actually hope to do that. Any statement that is true, I should have said that. I mean, that is part of Hilbert's. And also you have an algorithm which you write a sentence in the theory and it can check whether that sentence has a proof or not. One such theory is Presburger arithmetic. This is basically the first order theory of natural numbers with addition. Now Gödel showed that if you have addition and multiplication, the theory becomes undecidable. But if you have only addition, right? So the statements only involve order and addition. And once you have zero, you can always define order. And he used a technique called quantifier elimination. But then Buhy used finite state automata to give a much simpler proof of this fact that every statement can be checked whether it's true or not, whether it's a theorem of the theory or not. And okay, here is Presburger. Presburger is also an interesting person. I mean, he, a little aside, he proved this theorem that for sort of theory of natural numbers, addition is decidable, and he was a student of Alfred Tarski. Tarski told him this is good enough for a master's thesis, but not for a PhD. And poor Presburger was heartbroken. He went on to fight in the war, and he died in the Holocaust. So here is Presburger. He didn't do very much work, but beautiful work what he did. So Presburger arithmetic, you write, say, what is this Presburger arithmetic? It's the kind of mathematical statements that are used for writing for all x and there exists, etc. So the first one says there exists y such that x is equal to y plus y. This says x is even, right? And the second one says x is actually equal to 1 because it says it's not equal to 0, and for all y, if y is not equal to 0, y has to be greater than or equal to x. Here is another which says that addition is commutative. And I have not written the formula for saying x is an oops number. Now, if you could have oops as an additional predicate, I can write, there exists x, y, n equals x plus y, and oops x equal to 1 and oops y equal to 1, for instance. Two talks about, your given number n can be expressed as the sum of two oops numbers. So this is the kind of things that you write. Now, what Buki did was that you take any such sentence. So, in general, you take a sentence which has got a whole lot of quantifiers. The quantifiers x and the variables x, y are referred to natural numbers, and you use addition, equality, use negation, whatever Boolean connectors you like, and the quantifiers for all that exist. You take such a sentence, and then what he showed was you take you can construct a finite state automaton that checks whether that particular sentence that you have written is true or false. And the way it is done, first you have your, suppose you have n free variables, you have to find some numbers for them, and those numbers you have to represent them somehow. And you take an alphabet which talks about, sigma nk stands for n-tuples of integers in base k. For example, 17.5 in binary, I would represent by the word. A word is simply a sequence over this. Here is a sequence of pairs, right? Because I'm taking base 2. And 17 is 10001 in binary, 5 is 00101. So I take them in positions and form tuples, and the automaton takes sequences of this kind, and for any particular sequence, it will say accept or reject. That means that number is in the set coded by the automaton, or it is reject means it's not in the set coded by the automaton. So, and he gave an inductive construction where you have automata for checking atomic formulas, basic formulas like equality, less than, addition, and these. And then you show that, then you have negation. You show that the language's behavior accepted by finite state automata is closed under complementation. Then for disjunction, you show it's closed under union. For existential quantifier, you show it's closed under projection, and so on. Now, this is a standard technique that we now teach to our theory of computation students or logic course. The new students just learned this, last month or so. Now, this is a terrible algorithm in terms of how the algorithm works, in terms of performance, that there are improvements possible and they're used now, but lower bound is always there. And I'll have more to say on this. There is a recent result by Bell, Hare, and Shalit. Now, what is the idea of, what's the advantage of having an automaton? So first thing is, whatever kind of candidate basis that you're talking about, you write some formulas in this logic. And this Buki's idea will tell you that from the sentences of the logic, from your specification, so to speak, I can synthesize automata. And then there is this very nice recent result, which is what, not just this result, a whole bunch of results related to this, led to this kind of breakthrough. It says, if a set S of natural numbers is recognized by a finite state automaton with n states, forget the n here, okay? It's more important to, yeah. So if it's recognized by a finite state automaton at all, then it is decidable that particular set forms an additive basis or an asymptotic additive basis of finite order. So for instance, the moment you know that OOPS numbers can be recognized by a finite state automaton, you know that checking whether an OOPS numbers form an additive basis or not is decidable. There is an algorithm which will check. Second thing is, if you do have a basis, there is a computable bound on the order of the basis. And then the minimal order itself is computable. So this provides the link, So whatever is the kind of thing that you want to check, you can write in logic. From that to synthesize automaton. From the automaton, you get an algorithm that will check whether the particular set that you have got forms an additive basis or not. That algorithm is very complicated. I wouldn't dream of even trying to present it in a short talk like this, but that's the way the whole business goes. So you get a recipe. All this gives us a recipe for finding additive basis. If the characteristic property of the candidate basis, you come up with some basis. Now, that's creativity, right? Here, people are using base B palindromes. Here, these guys were looking at binary squares or, what powers, kth powers, etc. You start with your candidate basis. If the characteristic property is definable in the first order theory of numbers with addition or with some masala thrown in, you can also add some more predicates and retain decidability. Very often that's what you need to do. Then we can get automata representations and then use the kind of algorithm that is there given by the previous theorem to decide whether that set forms a basis or not. This is the basic recipe. Now, complexity is a huge obstacle in this. And now I have to mention the secret. The algorithm that Buchy presented and I told you about, something that goes by induction on the structure of the formula, is very nice, very simple, but its running time is non-elementary. By that, I mean that if you take a formula of length m, in fact, so much length m, if you have quantified alternation, m, for all there exists for all, you keep switching quantifiers, and if your quantified alternation is m, this will take time 2 to the 2 to the 2 to the 2 to the 2 to the, where the tower is of height m. Okay, as nasty as you can think of. And in fact, what is very nice is 1976, Nair and Stockmeyer showed that this kind of law, this particular, they showed it for another logic, but from which it follows that that's a lower bound for the automata construction. So pretty nasty, right? So complexity is an obstacle, but implemented algorithms work surprisingly well. And okay, much bigger problem, even if you say that, okay, implementation, I'll do something. The characteristic property may not be definable in Pressburger arithmetic or the kind of decidable extensions that we know. For instance, the Madhusudan et al. Result that I mentioned for Lagrange type theorem using binary squares is a case in point. Because what's a binary square? A binary square is simply something of the form, well, we write W square usually. You take a word W or a sequence and you write square to mean you repeat that word. Like for instance, the number 45 written in binary is 101, 101, and that's a binary square because it is of the form WW. Now, a number m, it's very easy to see that a number m is a binary square if and only if it is of the form a times 2 power n plus 1, where n is greater than or equal to 1, and a lies between 2 power n minus 1 and 2 power n. Now, binary squares have the same density among the natural numbers as perfect squares, so it's a reasonable candidate to check if they form an asymptotic additive basis. Now, but the problem is, this is something that, of course, by now all the computer science crowd in the audience know what the problem is, that unfortunately, the set of numbers of the form WW, let me just say 0, 1 here, sigma is just the binary alphabet 0. It's not recognizable by a finite state automaton. This is again an exercise that is given to first year theory of computation students to show that there is no finite state automaton recognizing these things. But then you realize now starts the clever part, and this is the kind of thing I want to emphasize. Lots of cleverness goes into these kind of things. And it's very nice idea. After all, what is it that you want? You are trying to show that every number is a very sufficiently large number. M can be represented as the sum of 4 binary squares, right? So I'm looking for x1, x2, x3, x4. So you give me M, and I want to write it as a sum of x1 squared plus x2 squared plus x3. This is what I want to do. Now I realize that I don't really need to actually carry x1, x1, right? So what I do I work with representations which work only with 1/2. Okay, so I keep with me copies only of x1, x2, x3, x4, and while doing the addition, I do it carefully to make sure that I do it with a repetition. Go over it twice to do the repetition. This I'm just trying to give you the idea. After all, the proofs take some pages, and but then if you are going to do school addition with binary strings, right? You put one string on top of another and keep adding with carry moving left. That's very nice, but it works only with binary strings of roughly the same length, and that's a real serious problem. Okay. Otherwise, if the lengths differ arbitrarily, this idea that you can work with this half representation doesn't work at all. And employing an automaton to do this addition is not going to work. So we require the lengths of the squares employed to be either bounded by a constant or differ from each other and from the number m only by some bounded length. Okay. So then you realize that suppose I can instead look at the language, which is the set of M. It's not really M, the binary representation of M. Okay, we just fix the binary alphabet. The set of numbers M, which are of length, say 2L, such that I can find x1, x2, x3, x4, such that they differ in length only by, from L, by some numbers k1, k2, k3, k4, right? Now this language is regular for fixed. So the moment you fix the error, right, in length, the difference in length, the moment you fix k1, k2, k3, k4, then the number of, the set of strings of this kind is indeed regular. Now, this is again an exercise you can give to good theory of computation student, and you can. So the point is, okay, if you can find appropriate k1, k2, k3, k4, then there is some hope of proving the main theorem using all those, chaining various assertions, navigating through these things. How do you find these numbers k1, k2, k3, k4, right? Now, this seems, a non-starter because that's a big guess, right? Which algorithm is going to be able to guess such a thing? That's unbounded search. It looks like something that you cannot do. So what we want is to search for an appropriate lemma for a particular combination of length differences that is actually valid. And what is very interesting now, given that checking these lemmas for any particular set of combinations, right? If I give you some particular combinations and checking whether, they form an additive basis or not, that is decidable. So you actually search for these lemmas automatically. So this is the next level. You use decision procedure to search for, k1, k2, k3, k4, and now that's a semi-decidable procedure, as they call, and these people employ all this. Okay, so for instance, this is a lemma that is generated by this search, okay, discovered through decision procedure, and the lemma is actually proved using another decision procedure. And so, for instance, they come up with every positive integer of length n greater than or equal to 13, where n is odd, is the sum of binary squares of the form 1 of length n minus 1 and 1 of length n minus 3, or 1 of length n minus 1 and 2 of length n minus, and so on, right? So this is one crazy combination, and this combination was discovered by decision procedure employing search, which is a semi-decision procedure. And luckily, because these numbers are small, and they kept using it with bounded search, and they actually found the combination. And so what is amazing is that a whole lot of decision procedures come together in answering this question. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you. So, and then, so even though the main theorem that you're talking about on the Lagrange's theorem for binary squares is not, if you state it in formal logic, that is not a decidable theory. What you can do is use decision procedures for different things, put together, and run this automaton construction. The automata, again, another thing, right? You have to check for non-emptiness of the automata constructor, and that's not something that you can do by hand, because each of these automata has, they say one takes 3,400 states, another takes 4,300 states. I don't know the number, some such numbers that they say, but it's again algorithms that are doing the job. And what is the final beautiful part is that the proof generated is machine checked by another interactive theorem prover. So they have gone through this entire length all along using a various combinations of techniques working with decidable theories. Okay, I'm almost at the end of the thing. So there are lots of very, very interesting questions that come up. For instance, you take theory of natural numbers with addition, something which says x is power of 2. That is known to be decidable. If I say x is power of 3, that's also decidable. But if I put both of these together, it's not clear. I mean, it's open. If I take, as I said, add masala, right? I mean, one very natural thing to add is a predicate saying it's prime. That has been an open problem for a very long time. In fact, this was one of the things posed by Tarski in 1940. And for instance, he also asked, if I add the Euler function, is it decidable? So Presburger arithmetic just has addition, and that is decidable. If you add multiplication also, Gödel tells you that it becomes undecidable. What is the thing in between? There is a very beautiful theorem called Cobham's conjecture, which suggests that there is a very bizarre predicate. Let me not mention you that. That is in fact the borderline. That is, he showed that it's decidable, and he conjectured that anything which has more power is going to be undecidable. All these things, but who knows? But my point is that every such, in fact, it was the theorem showing that with the addition of that predicate, the definable sequences are exactly the automatic sequences, which was proved in the 80s. That opened up a whole lot of this kind of research. So once again, to me, it's conviction that, working on decision problems of logics almost always leads to beautiful, like Ramsey's theorem was one which he came up with in the process of proving, a particular fragment of first order logic to be decidable, and it launched Ramsey theory. Almost each of these, the techniques open up ways of asking new questions. I'm not sure that all this will, answer hard problems of number theory, but you'll be able to pose new questions and answer them in very interesting ways that expand our horizons. Thank you.
Thanks, Shyam, for the fascinating talk and also being on time. Questions? So,
I have a short question.
please.
Yes, Bhaskar.
Yeah, it's a very nice talk. In physics, the only time I come across automata is cellular automata. Some set of rules and then it generates.
Yeah.
So can cellular automata play some helpful role?
Cellular automata are as powerful as Turing machines, and almost any non-trivial question that you can ask of their behavior is undecidable, in the sense that there is no algorithm that uniformly will check, any such property for all such things. So, and it's also an open question, for instance, to determine exactly which are, for instance, even if you take linear cellular automata, one-dimensional ones, which ones are recognizable in the sense that I defined is open. So even that characterization. So here, these are intended, the idea is to employ algorithms that work automatically on any instance.
Thank you, John.
Questions? Are there any more questions? Prakash, go ahead.
Hello, Jam.
Yes.
Yeah. So you had some magic number in some of your theorems, right? So were they also determined? So were they also determined? How were they determined in some sense?
Yeah. There's 45. There are in fact 45 exceptions according to them below the number 680, 686. Yeah. I forgot now whatever is the number there. And this is all done, discovered through decision procedures.
So there is no natural
going over this. Yeah. I mentioned this only for I chose the Madhusudan et al. Paper to highlight the techniques. If you look at the Waring's theorem paper, which came last year, it's also very interesting because it uses a huge amount of linear algebra. The Vandermonde matrices that Ventesh talked about in the last seminar is heavily used. So it's, combination of all kinds of techniques. Basically you bulldoze them into generating, you work with representations in lots of ways, generate equations and solve them, generate inequalities and solve them. Finally, you want some algorithm that will go through the case analysis. That's the idea. Yeah. Yes,
questions?
Meena has that.
Yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned that these algorithms.
Meena, you're not. I can't hear you very well. Sorry, can you be a little louder?
Yeah. Sorry, I had not. So these algorithms, in many cases, they have non-elementary runtime. But so you had mentioned in the beginning that somewhere towards the beginning that whenever there is an algorithm to check whether this set has the characteristic property of the set, then you can check whether it forms a basis and you can compute the minimal order. So this minimal order itself, how large can it be? Is that also unbounded?
I only said computable function. So in fact, I don't think the precise complexity is not determined yet. I think the algorithm that they give is non-elementary. Its running time is
but that is the runtime of the algorithm. I'm asking about the value of the order itself.
That I don't know. I think
because I would expect in any case that the actual order, even when it does form a basis, would be much less than the actual runtime.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact,
So
I mean,
could
in
it be
all
that
these
the order is
cases,
also very large?
in all these cases that people have done, if you have seen, right, it's always the particular order, it's always 3 or 4.
Three or
Right?
four. Yeah, yeah.
Right?
In all the
And
examples.
but then are they are proving that for every K there exists a B, right? So,
Hmm. Hmm.
so it's either for all there exists kind of statements, or a particular number which is very, very small. So,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I don't know the general answer to that question. I mean, Jeff Shalit, I'm sure knows, but it's not there in the paper.
Okay. One more question I had with respect to this paper, the set of results of Madhusudan et al.'s paper,
Yeah.
that every number can be expressed as one of these.
Yeah.
There were some 5 or 6 cases.
Right.
So these, but are those 5 or 6 cases that they have exhaustive?
For the odd case, it is, but
Oh, I see.
they have several
Like,
more. There is one for the even case. It's got many complicated lemmas. So
I see. Okay.
I think. I mean, I have to go over the paper carefully to answer all. But
No,
for
I
this
didn't even
particular
know
one,
about this paper till I saw your abstract. So very interesting.
it's MFCS 2018 and beautiful.
Thanks.
Shyam, one short last question.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Bhaskar.
See, for example, Fermat's last theorem, it has been proved in our lifetime. And is it possible to, I mean, I always wanted to understand it, but it's intimidating. Is it possible to understand it using automata theory, or are there attempts to?
I doubt it. I very much doubt it. I think these things of, I mean, what do I know? I mean, really? Huh? Yeah, but at least I don't expect to understand it using automata theory in my lifetime. Doesn't put it that way, right? I mean, automata theory is a long way to grow up. I mean, it is to grow up enormously before it can do any of these things. Because these things, we are using essentially the fact that numbers have sequences of, or finite sequences in base K, right? And automata are good at processing sequences. This is where we start. And when there is, what is very interesting is that Pressburger in 1930s told us that additive, if you are only interested in the additive structures of sets, well, there is some hope. And as long as you are doing that, well, there is some hope. And I also forgot to mention that all the results that I mentioned in binary, of course, you do it in any base K, that's not an issue at all. And that's also very nice because it liberates you into thinking in arbitrary basis. Periodic numbers, they're a beautiful thing. But to answer your thing, I mean, that kind of deep questions, I very much doubt if this kind of techniques will have any.
Thank you.
So let's thank Jam for this fascinating talk. Jam, thank you for being on time. Thank you.